Have you ever done something so small that it completely changes someone's day without even realizing it? Emily didn't think twice when she left half of her sandwich on the park bench for the Bulldog sitting there, looking like he hadn't eaten all morning. But then something happened that made everyone around stop and stares. Miles spreading like sunlight, phones snapping pictures, and even strangers whispering, "Did you see that?" In that moment, no one could look away. Something ordinary had turned into something extraordinary. And it all started with a tiny, unnoticed act. Emily had always been the type of person who noticed the small things that most people overlooked. She worked at a cozy little cafe near the park, the kind where the chairs never matched. The coffee cups were chipped in the corners, and the old jukebox played songs nobody could name but everyone somehow recognized. Thursday afternoons were her favorite, not because they were exciting or special, but because the cafe would slow down just enough for her to step outside, breathe, and eat the sandwich she packed that morning. A simple peanut butter and jelly she liked because it reminded her of home. That afternoon, the sun was soft, casting a warm glow over the park benches and the few trees scattered across the walking paths. Emily carried her sandwich to her favorite bench under an old oak, the wood worn smooth from years of use. As she unwrapped it and took a bite, she felt a moment of relief. This was her time, her little pocket of peace in the middle of a busy day. She had only just settled when she noticed Bruno, the neighborhood bulldog, waddling slowly toward her. Bruno wasn't the kind of dog that barked loudly or jumped around constantly. He was old, his face wrinkled in a way that made him look perpetually concerned, and his short legs gave him a waddling, almost comical gait. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet attentiveness, that made him impossible to ignore. He sat a few feet away, sniffing the air, tilting his head as though he were trying to decide whether Emily was trustworthy. She hesitated for a moment, not used to feeding other people's pets, but the way he looked at her tugged at something she couldn't name. On impulse, she tore off a small piece of her sandwich and placed it gently on the bench beside him. Bruno sniffed it carefully, then took it slowly, almost delicately, his ears flicking back as if approving of her choice. The moment was so small, so ordinary, yet it felt significant, and Emily found herself smiling before she even realized it. People walking by started to notice. Some paused, smiled, and whispered to one another. One woman leaned toward her friend and said, "She's giving him food." A man chuckled and muttered, "Look at that, he's so careful." Never thought I'd see a bulldog act like that. Emily barely noticed them, too absorbed in the quiet connection forming between her and Bruno. The way he tilted his head, his little tail wagging just enough to make her heart lift. Then, without warning, tension arrived in the form of a jogger. A man appeared around the corner, slightly out of breath, calling out, "Hey, that's my dog." Bruno's leash had somehow slipped from his owner's hand earlier, and now the man jogged closer, face a mix of frustration and relief. Emily froze, unsure what to do. I just gave him a little snack," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I didn't mean any trouble." The man paused, looked down at Bruno, and a small laugh escaped him. "He's usually picky," he admitted, "but I guess he likes you." Relief washed over Emily, mixed with embarrassment. She hadn't meant to draw attention, yet a few people had stopped, curious about the little interaction unfolding. Bruno, meanwhile, sat firmly beside her, looking proud of himself, tail flicking lazily as if to say, "See? I'm worth it." The afternoon drifted on quietly. Emily pulled her phone from her bag, scrolling through messages she barely read, glancing at Bruno every few seconds. Then a small commotion broke out nearby. A little girl had tripped and dropped her ice cream cone, face scrunched in disappointment, tears beginning to form. Without thinking, Emily tore another small piece of her sandwich and handed it to the girl. The child's eyes widened. "Really?" she asked, incredulous. Emily nodded with a smile. Bruno barked softly, as if approving of her choice. The girl's mother, nearby, chuckled softly, shaking her head in quiet amazement. The crowd of passers-by had grown slightly, drawn in by the gentle scene of kindness unfolding in real time. Phones were raised to capture it, whispers of approval circulating, all noticing a moment so ordinary yet so quietly meaningful. Emily wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't performing. She was just responding to what felt natural, an instinct to share, to care, to be present. And yet, the impact was already rippling outward in ways she hadn't imagined. From across the park, Jake, Bruno's owner, watched from a distance, leash in hand, clearly unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. He was tall, with a casual air that suggested he spent more time outdoors than anywhere else, and his eyes kept flicking between Emily and Bruno, noticing the way the dog leaned into her presence, the way she spoke softly, smiling at him like he was already a friend. Finally, he approached, hesitated a moment, and then spoke. "I guess he's attached to you now," he said, a small laugh in his voice, half embarrassed, half amused. Emily laughed lightly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Seems like it," she said. The subtle warmth of the moment made the lingering tension dissipate. The crowd had noticed something gentle and real, something that wasn't contrived or flashy, and they responded with quiet smiles. Emily and Jake continued to watch, the interaction evolving naturally. Bruno nudged her hand with his snout as if asking for a little more attention, and she obliged, laughing softly. She could feel the small energy shifting around them, people slowing down to watch, some snapping photos, others simply smiling to themselves. And then the afternoon unfolded further in unpredictable, natural ways. A stray ball rolled near the bench, and Bruno, surprisingly spry for his age, nudged it back to the little girl, who squealed with delight. Emily helped her pick it up, brushing off the dirt and handing it back. The girl ran off, glancing back once, eyes wide, waving at Emily and Bruno, leaving the moment suspended in the kind of quiet satisfaction that only comes when something small touches more lives than expected. Jake, standing nearby, couldn't help but laugh softly. "You're making him spoiled," he said, half joking, half serious. Emily shrugged, smiling at the dog, at the park, at the way these tiny acts, so small, so mundane, created a sense of connection she hadn't anticipated. The rest of the afternoon moved with similar, quiet rhythms. Birds landed on nearby benches, children's laughter echoed faintly, and the occasional passerby glanced at Emily and Bruno, sensing something heartwarming without needing an explanation. Emily reflected on the odd way life could unfold. A simple act of sharing a snack could create ripples that reached far beyond what one might expect, connecting strangers, softening a man's frustration into laughter, and reminding the few watching of something they might have forgotten. The small human gestures matter. By the time the sun began to lower, brushing golden light across the park paths, Emily had grown accustomed to the subtle energy that surrounded her. Bruno, still content beside her, yawned lazily and curled slightly against her leg. Jake had taken a few steps back, watching, observing the easy connection. unsure if he should speak, but unwilling to disrupt the moment. And Emily, she sat quietly, half smiling, half lost in thought, realizing that this ordinary Thursday had become quietly extraordinary, all because of a half-eaten sandwich, a patient bulldog, and a willingness to notice and respond to the small things in life. By the time she rose to leave, the gentle ripples of her presence remained. A few lingering smiles from strangers, a mother still chuckling softly, a little girl skipping home with her ball, and a man who now looked at his bulldog in a new, amused way. Emily walked off slowly, aware that moments like this didn't have to be dramatic or staged. They just happened when kindness was small, real and unassuming. And as she disappeared from the park path, the quiet warmth of the afternoon lingered, a tiny story unfolding in the hearts of everyone who would pause to witness it. By late afternoon, the park had started to fill with the usual mix of people: joggers, parents chasing toddlers, college students lounging on blankets, and dog walkers with leashes dangling loosely from their hands. Emily stayed on the bench a little longer, feeling almost rooted to the spot as Bruno rested beside her, his head on her lap now, eyes half closed in comfort. The small crowd of curious onlookers had thinned slightly, but a few lingered, still smiling, whispering softly to one another about the unexpected sweetness of the moment. Emily hadn't planned to become a spectacle, and yet, quietly, without any intention of performing, she had captured attention simply by being present and kind. Jake, Bruno's owner, remained nearby, watching the bulldog with a mix of amusement and admiration, leaning against a tree with the leash loosely held in one hand. He had started talking to Emily in bits and pieces, casual conversation about the park, about Bruno's habits, about the coffee shop she worked, yet it felt natural, unforced, like talking to someone you've known longer than you actually have. The bulldog, sensing the calm energy between them, shifted occasionally, sniffing at Emily's hand or nudging her gently, his short tail wagging lazily. It was a quiet harmony, small and unassuming, but powerful in the way it subtly drew everyone around into its orbit. Then, from somewhere nearby, a person pulled out a phone and started recording. It wasn't intrusive. The camera simply caught Emily laughing softly as Bruno licked her hand, the sunlight catching his fur in a warm glow, and the casual, gentle way Jake observed the interaction. Within moments, a few other people had noticed and quietly raised their phones too, capturing snippets of the scene. It was surreal, Emily thought, how something so ordinary, a half-eaten sandwich, a patient dog, a friendly conversation, could suddenly feel so significant. She glanced at Bruno, and he looked back at her with that same attentive, almost knowing expression, as if he understood that something bigger was unfolding beyond their little corner of the park. The atmosphere shifted when a group of teenagers approached, curious about the commotion. They crouched down, whispering, asking softly if they could pet Bruno. Emily nodded, smiling, and as they gently stroked the bulldog, the energy in the area changed again: laughter, soft chatter, and the occasional camera click. Each small action, the teenager's tentative hands, Bruno's gentle nudges, Emily's soft guidance, added layers to a moment that had started so simply. Jake finally stepped closer, brushing a loose curl from his forehead, and said, almost quietly, "You've got away with him." Emily laughed softly, brushing her own hair behind her ear. "I think he just likes kindness." They exchanged glances, a subtle understanding passing between them, the kind that doesn't need words but lingers anyway. Around them, the the scene continued to ripple outward. A mother, watching her child play nearby, whispered to another parent, "Look at that. It's so sweet." A passerby adjusted their phone, sharing a short video with a friend. And in that moment, Emily realized how quickly a small, genuine act could create a web of human connection, touching people she might never meet, leaving an invisible warmth that spread farther than she could imagine. As the afternoon slowly faded into early evening, Jake suggested they take Bruno for a walk. Emily hesitated for only a moment before nodding, standing up and brushing imaginary crumbs from her lap. Bruno immediately stood, tail wagging, as if he understood that this was the next part of their shared adventure. The walk was leisurely, slow enough for the Bulldog to sniff at every tree and bench post along the path. Emily walked beside him, and Jake fell naturally into step on the other side, a quiet rhythm forming between the three of them. The park felt different, a little warmer, each step echoing the small but profound connections that had begun with a single gesture, a shared sandwich. They passed by strangers who waved or smiled, and Emily noticed subtle changes in everyone around. The jogger who had passed earlier slowed to watch them. A little boy paused mid-stride to point at Bruno and whisper to his mother, and a few people on benches turned to glance, their faces softened with quiet amusement. The video clips posted online began to circulate, first among friends in town, then reaching farther as social media did its work. Comments poured in, messages of "so heartwarming, this made my day," and "I wish I had a neighbor like her," appearing alongside the tiny footage of Emily, Bruno, and Jake walking slowly through the park. The realization hit her in quiet waves. Something small, done without thought of recognition or reward, had sparked genuine joy in people she would never meet. The story didn't end in fanfare, fame, or drama, ended in moments. Like a heartbeat, Emily smiling softly, Bruno waddling happily by her side, Jake's easy laughter threading through the park air, and a community of strangers quietly touched by what they witnessed. At one point, Bruno stopped mid-walk, nudging Emily's hand with his snout, and she knelt to pet him. Jake glanced at her, noticing the gentle care, and said, "You have this way of making people and dogs feel safe." Emily chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I just notice them, I guess." The quiet honesty in her voice seemed to resonate with him, and the two of them walked a few steps in companionable silence, the kind that doesn't demand words. As dusk approached, the golden light shifted to softer shades, painting the park paths with warmth. Emily, Jake, and Bruno paused near a fountain, watching the water ripple, and Emily realized how small gestures had a ripple effect, not just outward, but inward too. She felt it in her chest, a soft satisfaction, a quiet understanding that the simplest acts, sharing a snack, noticing someone, being present could leave an indelible mark. A couple passing by stopped briefly, watching the trio, and one said, "That's beautiful," almost to themselves. Emily smiled without thinking, feeling the simple truth in it. They continued their walk until Bruno seemed content enough to head home, leash secure in Jake's hand. Emily and Jake lingered a moment by the park bench where it had all begun. The scene now quiet, empty of most passers-by, yet still carrying the echo of earlier warmth. Jake smiled, a little shyly this time, and said, "Would you want to meet here again? Just for walks, maybe coffee after?" Emily considered it, the weight of the day's unexpected joy lingering in her mind, and nodded. "I'd like that," she said softly. The bulldog wagged his tail in approval, and for a brief second, the entire scene, the snack, the park, the laughter, the small crowd of onlookers felt like a tiny, complete world, perfectly ordinary yet extraordinary in its quiet, human way. That night, Emily reflected on the ripple effect. A single, unplanned act had spread through the park, through social media, through strangers' hearts, reminding her that what feels small often carries far more weight than we ever imagine. Millions of hearts online had smiled, and countless more in person had paused, witnessed, and felt something real. The lesson was subtle, almost invisible. Kindness doesn't need to be grand. Gestures don't need applause, and impact doesn't need recognition. Emily had discovered that the ordinary could become extraordinary simply by being present, noticing, and acting gently. The bulldog had been the spark, yes, but the real warmth came from human connection, the smiles exchanged, the small conversations, the quiet acknowledgements that each person mattered, even if just for a moment. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the park emptied, Emily walked home with a light heart, Bruno safely back with Jake, and a quiet satisfaction that sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest acts leave the deepest marks. Next time someone walks past a dog, a stranger, or even a friend, maybe a little gesture, a smile, or a tiny act of attention can ripple outward in ways you never see, but they matter. And that's exactly what had happened that Thursday. A half-eaten sandwich, a patient bulldog, and a simple choice to notice someone led to millions of hearts quietly melting. Proof that small acts of care and attention are more powerful than we often give them credit for.